This is part 2 to our discussion around classes and creating classes in Kotlin. So one of the things I talked about a little bit in the previous lecture, but I didn't actually demonstrate, was doing constructors in more of an old-fashioned way. So let me show that to you. So I'm just going to create a little sample class here. We're just going to call it CH, short for chapter. Normally, of course, we'd never name something like this, but this is just so I can have a quick demo. So if we did it, more the old-fashioned way, I might have a, let's say it could even be a val of chapter number, just like before, and it is an int. Notice it's not an optional int, I made it just an int, so it has to have a value. So if I try to run this right now, we're going to get a problem, right? Because it must be initialized or abstract, meaning that it would be subclassed and implemented somewhere else. So I have to have an initializer. Down here, it didn't matter. We automatically created, Kotlin automatically created a constructor, but here we don't have one, so we'll have to create one. We do that with the keyword constructor, and then we just create a method signature like normal. I can even use the exact same name if I want. And then now we'd say this dot chapter number equals chapter number. And now if I run now, I should be able to run without any errors. Works out great. So if I come down here, let's just do a real quick test so we can see what's going on. So let's do val c equals ch, and I need to pass in a chapter number. So I'll call it chapter 8. And then if I do print line C, what we'd expect to see now is the little memory pointer thingy right here. So again, you can use old-fashioned constructors if you need to. I think what you'll find though is a lot of times you don't. So the next thing let's look at is, and I'm going to come back to constructors in a minute, but before I do that, I want to talk about what's going on here. So I've mentioned several times that when I call print line and pass in some kind of an object, it calls toString. So what you'll see here is toString. It always exists. It's just by default, it just prints out the name, at, and then a location. When I do a data class, it automatically created this little nicer look where it says, here's the name of the object, and then for this instance of the object, here's the properties and their values. So if I wanted to do something similar to this here, and I don't make it a data class, you could still do it. I could do fun to string. Right. However, if I try to run this right now, I'm going to get an error because toString already exists. Right? So I'm trying to override the toString implementation. So I have to use the keyword override. Just Kotlin wants you to be explicit to make sure that you're very clear that you are overriding the existing toString implementation. And now I could say, something like return ch, and they use an at, or then they did what? Parentheses, chapter number equals, and then I can do $, chapter number, and get the instance variable. So now when I run it, we'll get an output that looks, somewhere I got, some overriding, I need to be explicit. All right, so we get something that looks very similar that we just rolled our own. Down in the data class, we could also override this if I wanted, if I don't like the toString. Although, bear with me a second, I'm going to go ahead and delete these because this is all I'm going to demonstrate with that so that we have a little less code to look at. Let's get rid of these. Okay, so when I run this, right, we get this default toString. If I don't like it, I can certainly override it up here. So we can override toString, returns a string, and now do whatever I want. So maybe let's do this. Sometimes when things get complicated, I like to make them their own variable, even though I'm just going to return it. So let's call it description, and it's going to be equal to, let's make this like a nice printout if we wanted to print out the contents of the book. So I could say chapter, and then I'm going to use this, so I need to put it inside the brackets. although I could have just said chapter number, would have been fine. And then dash. And then I want to put the chapter title. And I want that to appear in quotes, so I want to print it out. There's quotes around the chapter title. You could just be, sneaky and just use single quotes and then put $, chapter title. But I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I actually want them in double quotes. So to do that, you can use the slash as an escape symbol. And this tells it, now treat this as a literal character, not as a formatting character. Right? So it's going to take me a minute to convince the editor to leave that there. Okay, there we go. So that'll print a quote, and then we'll do this .title. And then maybe in parentheses I say that it is pages, $ this dot, what do we got? It's first page, right? F-I-R-S-T, page. And I'm going to need that. Sorry, mark it as code. Oh, I missed. There we go. There we go. Sorry. When you're doing string concatenation, as you guys probably should, or you should know by now, it gets hard sometimes to get all the little everything formatted properly. But it's one of the things where these $ help. This just gets a little confusing because I decided I wanted to put in these escaped characters so that you would be introduced to escape characters. So it's going to print out pages, the first page, and then 2, and then let's do this dot last page. And then we can get rid of the space here at the end. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's going to override it. So now instead of printing chapter number, title, it actually prints out, somewhere. Oh, I got to do a return. Sorry. So we'll just do a return description. And somewhere I've got a typo. So I leave these. I do like to leave these in the videos just because I think it helps to see that making mistakes is normal in our field. But I got to figure out where is it. So val, okay. Expecting member declaration. This .chapter number is certainly legit. Did I mistype it? Chapter number is good. Title is good. First page is good. And number of pages. Oh, actually, last page is good. So where is my bug? Oh, we'll find it here. Oh, override func toString. There we go. Okay, so again, at least you got to see in live like how I debug things, where I start my thought process. I overlooked this first line, immediately thought that I just mistyped a variable, so I went through and was copying and pasting them to make sure that they were correct, and then later found out that, oh, forgot to type the word fun. So down here you see now it's chapter 2, Once Upon a Time, pages 11 to 15. Very pretty, very nice. The overriding toString, I just show this, understand, not because I expect you to override toString often, but I want you to understand the concept that if there is, you're using a class, that you need to override something, here's how you do it. Now that said, I have found personally that overriding toString comes in very handy. Now, what I will say is for data classes, what Kotlin produces is very nice. Most languages don't have that built in, and I found myself implementing something very similar to what Kotlin auto-generated for me on my own, so that when you're debugging and you're printing stuff out to the console, it makes it easier to debug, right? Because you have all the information available. So anyway, there we go. So there's override of functions. And let me check my notes here to see if there's anything else I want to talk in this video. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Okay, so when I created this up here, right, each one of these had to have, and if I leave something off, let's say we did another one here, val chapter 3, and the story continues. It starts on page, so that would be what, 15, and let's say it's only one page. So I have to enter all 3 of these, and we've already talked about we certainly could have done name parameters, just so that it doesn't take forever. The lectures don't take forever where I'm typing things and mistyping them all the time. I'm not putting those in, but I do strongly encourage you to use name parameters. Although don't worry about it too much in this editor, but once you switch to Android Studio, what you'll see is it auto puts them in there for you. And I think I already mentioned this. If I haven't mentioned this, I'll talk about it when we get to Android Studio, actually. Let's just leave it at that. But it makes your code a lot easier to read. But let's say that, here I have to enter all 4 pieces of data. Well, what if, we mainly were building this system for software that was mostly doing books of poetry, and that each poem was its own chapter, and that usually chapters only have 1 page because poems usually fit on 1 page. Right? Again, just kind of making up something arbitrary, because what I want to show you is I can go up here and do this. Just like we could do on functions, we can do default values. I can default them here too. So if I leave this off, and now let's print chapter 3, everything still works just fine because it defaulted to 1. I didn't have to put it in here. It assumes the default. So you can set default values, and in fact this comes up a lot. It's not unusual at all. And this is one of the reasons too why this flexibility in between this and init, you really don't often need to do your own constructors. And it makes your code clear. So in something like Java or other languages, if I wanted to create a constructor that took 4 parameters or a constructor that took these 3, typically what you would do is you create a constructor that took all 4 of these parameters, and then I'd create a second constructor that only took 3 parameters, and then that second constructor would call the first constructor passing in the default value. And if you wanted one, let's say with 2, right, same thing. You'd have to create another one, call. This just shortcuts the whole thing, reduces the amount of code, which reduces the amount of potential problems. And once you get used to it, actually makes everything much more sensible and clean. But you do, again, always have the option to flip back and do an old-fashioned constructor when you need it. And there will be times that you do. So with that, I'm going to end this lecture, and on the next lecture, we'll start picking up the book class where we use a collection of chapters.